Welcome, everybody, to the show. I just bumped the monitor. To Counter Clipping Show number 201 for December 9th, 2024. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Got a good turnout so far. So tonight's topic is we're going to take a look at a little-known publisher, a French publisher, Azure Wish Enterprises or Azure Wish Editions. You decide. Actually, they decided, but we got to figure it out. So we will be doing that tonight. We're going to take a look at, for a change, their entire output, because they didn't do that much. They did about 16 products total. So we're going to take a look at everything, although I will have very little to say about the Europa Universalis expansion. So I'd like to thank everybody once again for coming out. We are drinking the last of the Lafroig quarter cask bottled at 48%. It is outstanding, as is all Lafroig, in my opinion. So I'm going to do that, and we are clipping PTO, advanced PTO, because we didn't get it done last week. I figured I would get a little bit of, I only had like, I don't know, 2/3 of the counter sheet left, and I figured I would get that done during the week. I did not. So we will be doing that this evening. Everything left for the game is in this tray right here. So I got to make sure I registered that and Highway to the Reich with Decision, actually. So we'll be doing that. Anyway, the super chats and super stickers are on. If anybody wants to throw the channel a little bit of support, it is always much appreciated. And they have this. Well, I'll talk about the new YouTube feature if I use it. We'll see. I don't use a lot of the YouTube monetization features because I think they're all kind of annoying. But that's also a great way to get your comment highlighted if you'd like an answer, because I'll respond to a comment that's in a super chat or super sticker. And again, the channel appreciates that. Also, like to give a shout out to both the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, without whose support and encouragement we would literally not be able to keep doing this. So thank you, patrons. Big shout out for our new swordsman patron this week, Kevin. So thank you, Kevin. The support is much appreciated. And of course, a shout out to our good friends at Noble Knight Games, the official sponsor of the Counter Clipping Show, from whom we will hear a little bit later. And I was a little surprised in checking that Azure Wish, there's quite a bit of Azure Wish product in stock at Noble Knight, actually, much more than I would have expected given the relatively uncommonality of the market for their games here in the U.S. They are, as we mentioned, a French publisher, and they did some really pretty interesting stuff. Although I don't know that everyone was necessarily a winner, but we'll see. We'll see what they do. I'm disturbing the stack of counters here, so there we go. Anyway, before we go any further with that, let's pull the actual list of people up. Let's say hello to Aaron Dennis. Something you had on Facebook today looked super duper interesting, and I don't remember what it was. Achilles, Bayonet Brant from the Armchair Dragoons, Board Gaming Geezer, Charles Latorre, Chet Bell, Christoph DeClerc, Dale Brady, Daniel Silverthorne, Danny Seckery, David Zell, E4 Airman from sunny Southwest Ohio, Ed Holtzman, Egret, Eric Goebel, Fidelis, Garrison Venn, Gronyard Rich, Henry Hartman. Welcome to the show. The legend himself, Fucko, is here tonight. Jeff Anderson, Jeff Beeler, Jeff Edwards, Jeff T, Joe Faust from sunny Northeast Ohio. Joe, I just reshelved your books today. Those will hopefully be appearing in a video on the other channel at some point, whenever I actually get that area ready. Joe Hammond, Joe Kobayashi, Joe Perez is here. Joe Benton, John Mogg, John Clark, Jonathan Dyer, Carl Crater from the Wargame Boot Camp, Lee Grant Manders, another Northeast Ohio native, Mark McNair, Mark Hodgkinson, Marty Sample is here, Meandering Mike, Nature's Whisper, Vermont Strolls. Welcome to the show. Palmer Eldritch, Panzer Division, Lair, Patchwork Pictures, Paul Dangle, Perfidious Albion, Perry Sparopoulos, Robert O. Ryan Heward, Scott Rowland, Stacking Limit is here, Stigler is in the house, Tim Greenhaw, Todd Cox, Tony Mammal, Vicky, welcome back, Wade Moore, and William Ahrens. I apologize once again, as usual, if I've missed anybody, which I'm positive that I have. So, anyway, this is day 12 or 13 tobacco free. I think it's 12. So we are still vaping. We're transitioning into the news segment, which I do have a couple of things, but the personal news first. So we have 13 days tobacco free, if not nicotine free, but hey, a little bit at a time. I will attempt not to vape on the show, although it's my show and I could if I wanted to. And I'm wearing a hat today because my hair looks terrible. I need a haircut. Bad. So, although if I take it off, it won't look that bad because I've been wearing this hat for like the last hour. So anyway, But we do have some news. I am 12, whatever it is. The last day that I smoked was Thanksgiving, and I like sat on that last cigarette for hours and reached for it literally 30 times before I just said screw it. And I'm glad I smoked it that day. That was my plan, by the way. But I'm glad I smoked it that day because it'd be hanging around bothering me if I hadn't. So anyway, excellent. Tim Greenhow got the Cube for Me trays. I like them a lot. I think they're a little more expensive than the GMT option, but I do think they are the nicest trays available. We lived with the GMT trays for a very long time, for many years, and I think over that span of time, a variety of different folks learned how those trays could be improved upon, and we're now seeing the results of those thoughts with both the Cube for Me trays and the Aegis trays. Um, so Jeff Beeler. So the you might want it if you have I assume we're talking about the Traveler Merchants Edition, which just came out. You might want it because it's cheap, at least digitally. At least the Explorers Edition was. If you order it in print, it's like $20. But if you have the Explorers Edition, the only difference is that instead of Scouts and Scholars, you get Merchants and maybe something else and a different like core ship for them to fly. So need it? No, you certainly don't need it if you've got the main book. Let me put it that way. The natural next step from the main book, from the Explorers Edition or the Merchants Edition, is just the core book. So, and definitely get the 2022. I think it's 2022 update of it. There's not a lot of changes, but the layout's different, and I think a bit better. And a variety of minor things like some weapon values changed and stuff like that. So this is always the struggle, right? This is literally why I did a series of videos on counter storage, because it is a challenge, right? And what are the things that I think about when I'm deciding what to store? Some of these markers for advanced PTO, for example, are going to end up in a baggie. Otherwise the whole thing fits in 3 GMT counter trays with the 3D printed dividers that I need to get back to making more or less immediately because I'm kind of out of them. The GMT sized ones I'm out of. I need to design some for the Aegis trays actually, but I got to get the printer working properly again too. So there's that. So anyway, I do have we'll talk about this shortly, but I do have an update, another update. But let's hit the news first. All right. So first news item is the OCS update. I will throw a link to this in the chat if anybody didn't catch it last week. This won't take long because there's not a huge amount of data here. So there are 5 games in development, okay, that are like pretty close, okay. One of which is the Forgotten Battles, which is on pre-order right now with multi-ban, and that should hit sometime early 2025. It has made its number. Everything is fine. That is a Tony Burkett design. I have ordered 2 because A, I'm crazy, and B, I want an extra copy to mate with Third Winter and Crimea, which I also have extra copies of, and the third of the games on this list. So the 4 games here are Cross-Channel Attack by designer Roland LeBlanc, the same designer as Beyond the Rhine, which has its issues, but is still a good game, right? It's just got a couple issues in the opening. I did play in the playtest of this, but it was very early in the playtest. It was like 3 or 4 years ago at this point. So I have confidence that the OCS development team will have that on track, and that it was pretty rough when I saw it, but like I said, it was pretty early. A Season in Hell by Stefan Aquaviva. Stefan, if you're watching, I apologize for screwing your name up, which I probably did. But that is one of the Kursk games that is in development, and Stefan knows what he is doing, so I have a pretty good confidence in that. It's a little bit tricky to model that in OCS, I think, but I am looking forward to that. And whatever they decide to do, I'll buy it and play it, so that's not a problem. Next up is, well, I don't know that these are in any kind of chronological order. I would not make that assumption, but I wouldn't expect to see Hero City hit pre-order until very late in 2025 at the earliest. That's my guess. Thomas Bandy from Lorain County, Ohio, the county I grew up in. But Hero City is the Leningrad sector. It is the third in the trilogy of big games, with one accompanying small game, which is Crimea. And I will buy 2 copies of that as well because I am a lunatic. So there's that. Where's this stuff going? Anyway, all right. And then there's the Battle Over Britain by literally designer Mark Watney. Folks, I can't write this. I couldn't write this any more appropriately for this science fictional theme. So what this sounds like is the Battle of Britain in OCS, which might be interesting with the accompanying potential of a sea lion invasion. So this is a mostly hypothetical, is what it feels like, because I don't know how satisfying just playing the air game out will feel in OCS. It won't be. I don't think it'll totally suck, but it's not like there's not like enough there to support an entire OCS game on its own, in my opinion. So that leaves this hypothetical sea lion thing. So I'm very curious. I don't know a lot about this one. I'm very curious to hear more. In the update, they also talk about various places where you can get some community connections in OCS. There's a Facebook group. There's a variety of other social media platforms. And there's a Discord, and this is the map of the Discord, I believe. Now, the big news in the update is actually not any of these. I am reasonably well informed, I think, about these 3 projects. Battle Over Britain, I knew it was cooking, but I didn't realize it was a little closer than I thought it was. So there's that. But the big news here is that OCS Honcho Chip Saltzman will be stepping down from that role at the end of 2024. That is, on the one hand, it's not great news because I think Chip has done a really good job, and I look forward to Chip's continuing contributions to OCS. But he will be replaced in that role by Carl Fung. I gotta think Carl is going to be pulling his hair out with all his work, to be completely honest. So I hope MMP is sending him a sizable paycheck to compensate for it. And then what else do we have here? Carl will be designing an OCS game on Poland 1939. I'm all over that. I think that is actually a very good topic based on my experience with the Blitzkrieg Legend. I think that is a very good topic for OCS, and I will totally buy it. So whatever Carl would like to do there, as points out here, that it's not the walkover you would necessarily expect based on the historical result. It's not a big update here, folks, but we do have an OCS update. Second piece of news. Yeah, apparently so. He is like the hurricane of wargaming, apparently. So, OCS is just a lot of fun to play, right? Once you get the hang of it, there's certainly a learning curve. Not everybody's going to like it. It's not going to be something everybody's into. All right, so we have the San Diego Historical Games Convention 2024 Summit Award finalists. The winner has been announced. The nominees were the British Way from GMT and designer Stephen Rangazis, Halls of Hegra from Tompet Games, designed by Petter Shanka Olsen, Land and Freedom from Alex Knight, published by Blue Panther, and We Are Coming Nineveh, designed by an entire design team, which includes Harrison Brewer, Rex Brannon, Juliette Namenege, which I'm told I'm not pronouncing that badly, I'm told, but my source is Dan, so bear that in mind. And Brian Train, and that was published by Nuts Publishing, and the winner is Land and Freedom from Alex Knight. That has just been announced in the last couple of days. So congrats to all these nominees, and especially to Mr. Knight, who won the Summit Award. Next up is the 2024 in Wargaming poll over at the Armchair Dragoons. I have just put a link to that in the... That's not going to work right. Hold on a second. I will fix that. That link is not probably going to work. So hold on a second. I'll pull another link. So they do this every year. It is a poll basically talking about what wargaming you did over the course of 2023. And it's worth taking. Nobody's but the Dragoons and Beyond Solitaire are really doing this kind of what is really market research. If somebody would care to leverage it in that way. Okay, that worked. Okay, so apparently both links work. But in any case, so apparently both links work. So, but this last one is the cleaner one of the two. So some enterprising publisher should get with the folks doing this stuff and try to leverage this as market research, because it's basically capturing a lot of the same information that market research would capture, and nobody's really done that aggressively since SPI, in my opinion. Decision kind of does it, but I worry that their feedback is the feedback of the people that participate in the Decision Games surveys, which includes myself, are kind of in a bit of a silo. So I wonder how much visibility those folks have on the rest of the hobby. So the wider a net we can cast with this kind of thing, the better. And I would encourage folks to participate in it. There is the little hiccup where you do need to, it does ask for the names of a couple of games that you've played and reacted to in specific ways over the course of the year. And you do need to put the BGG links in there. I 100% sympathize with Brant on that decision because I did the CSRs a couple years ago where we didn't have that and it was a total nightmare. But yeah, take this poll. Now, we're going to start talking about, with excellent time, we're going to have some extra time at the end. So I organized all of this, and unfortunately, everything crashed. So I lost the specific order that I was presenting these in. So we will do the most exciting games last, and the game that is now en route here first. That is La Revolution Francaise. So our Noble Knight campaign for La Revolution Francaise is complete. So I want to have a huge thanks to the folks. Oh, and by the way, we did have some winners yesterday. I have not shipped those games yet. My goal is to get that done this week. So my apologies to Mike and Mark on that, but they will be going out soon. So big shout out, though, to the folks that use the affiliate link. The Noble Knight big sales that have happened in the last month, I'm sure had something to do with it, too. I didn't expect this to go. I've said that every time. I didn't expect this to go as fast as it went. It went super fast. So this is on the way here and will probably be here this week. So this is true. This is true. And I tried to skip that one and it wouldn't let me. But in any case, there's that. So I once again, thanks to everybody. Thanks to Noble Knight Games for this delightful partnership that we have had. And they had like at least 2 sales in the last 30 days. So everything came through. It was more than I expected. And we are set. So I will announce a new campaign in a couple of weeks. Whenever we're in like target area for the whatever I'm calling the accounting to be done over on the Noble Knight side. So thanks everyone who used the affiliate link. Now there's a bunch of links in the video description to help support the show. One of which is the affiliate link. I get a little bit of a kickback if somebody uses that link to buy stuff through Noble Knight. You're buying stuff from Noble Knight anyway, folks. You might as well use my affiliate link. So, I don't know if they have this at Noble Knight at the moment, but the rest of the prices for the Noble Knight stuff were not that crazy. That said, they didn't have the Grand Guerre, so, but I already have that. Thank you, Mike, for that trade that happened. So this is a game, 1995 release, designed by Jean-Philippe Calliat, Jean-Pierre Courille, Charles-Jean Gerard, Robin Goyan, and 3 more. Is Philippe Thibault in here? No. You'll see his name a bunch tonight, folks. Lionel Ruel and Jean-Marie Rousseau. And Oliver Marquet? I'm not sure. Anyway, Board Game Geek does list them as Azure Wish Enterprise. So, and the only product I have from them at the moment in the house is the last one that we'll cover tonight, which will be Le Grand Guerre, I'll tell you that. So this looks like a really interesting game. There are not very many games on the French Revolution. Mike Wilner is working on one in the long term. I think he's doing the American Revolution next, which, hell, I'll buy that. But I'm particularly excited about his take on the French Revolution. Mike is the designer of the splendid Prelude to Revolution from Compass, which I played and is wonderful. And it was an insta-buy for me. Yes, indeed. We'll see how badly I do. My French is not great. I pronounce French like a guy from Ohio. So if that makes any sense at all. So this is an area-based map, as I recall. And in fact, here's an alternative version of the map, which is pretty sharp, actually. The Azure Wish maps tend to be what I will call kind of high saturation maps. This is much more subdued. Um, there's a lot of interesting history here. This doesn't cover the entire Revolutionary period; it only covers through 1795. But there's a lot of interesting. Let me pull this down. There's a lot of interesting history there to explore. So I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on this. So, yeah, potentially you could do a lot of the Napoleonic period might be a good candidate for a states of siege treatment, actually, with some modifications to fit the topic, of course. You could do the 100 Days, for example, as a states of siege treatment, and I think that would be very reasonable. And you could do this early. Revolutionary period too, where France is at war with essentially the entire continent. I think you could get away with that. For the bulk of the period that we tend to game in the Napoleonic Wars, which is like 1805 to 1814, excluding Waterloo and those other battles that happened in 1815, that not so much. But the Revolution, yeah, well, so the military part of the Revolution, but there's like a whole political angle to the Revolution too. And that is the kind of thing that Azure Wish explored in a game we'll talk about in a few minutes. So yeah, I think this idea has potential. Let me put it that way. Well, yeah, that's true. Well, yeah, that's true. Looking at it, looks like they do include Lille and Amiens, but I'm not sure what else. So we'll have to see it when we get it. So remember, the goal is always to play these things. Levy en masse from VPG. You're right, actually. And then this is a States of Siege game, as I recall. I forget who the designer was on that. But that is one that I'm actually looking at because of that. And it came back. I think from Worthington, or is it from Tabletop Tycoon or whoever bought VPG? Somebody brought this back in a nice edition. I hope it was Worthington. Nothing against the other folks, but I haven't bought anything from them, so I don't know. But I'm very happy with what I'm seeing out of Worthington. All right, so moving on from La Revolution Francaise, and we've got a lot of mileage out of this subtitle La Patrie en Danger. There are several games with that name, so yeah, that sounds right. John Welsh, Snooker Joe, thank you so much. Welcome back to the show. So yeah, I've got their deluxe edition, whatever they're calling it, of Soviet Dawn, and it's really nice. So if you're into solitaire war games, States of Siege is worth looking at. Also check out the video that we did last week where we interviewed Darren Leveloff, the originator of the States of Siege series. Let's call it a family. I think we're better off calling it a family, because there's a bunch of different publishers with their hands in that pie at this point, and a lot of different designers working in that space. So I think it would be misleading to call it a series, but we could call it a family of games with reasonably shared mechanics. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff here that I am blissfully unaware of, and this is one of them. I will assume, so this is a tactical naval game on a grid, which is supposed to be quite simple, and you can see the square grid at this point. I assume this title means something in French, but I am going to pronounce it Salve, because French got it from Latin after all, right? And not Salve, as we might pronounce it in Ohio. Brant says there was a digital version of Levy en masse too, which is cool. Is that on Steam by any chance? Brent McCabe, thanks for stopping by. So this looks potentially intriguing, and you can see that it's kind of a bunch of famous naval battles that you can play out using what looks like a quite simple system. Now, I should mention that, and we'll actually move back to Revolution Francaise in a second here, really quickly. We should look at the third-party market for this stuff, because all of it's out of print. Somebody might have a few copies in a garage. So, well, that's out for me then, if it's an iOS product. Salve? Okay, good. Well, for Latin, yeah, it's fine for Latin, but for French, I don't know. Or are we saying salve? And it's general Latin greeting, Salve. Designed by Sandra Zeltzer. who is a designer that I have not familiarized myself with, and BGG has essentially no information on it, so we're out of luck on that. This looks somewhat interesting, and as you can see, I think we will actually look at it at Noble Knight. $9 unpunched. So if you're looking to complete an Azure Wish collection, Mike, this might be one that you've already looked at. So there's that. Stuart says that there's a browser version of Leve en Masse run on a university website for educational purposes. It's ugly but functional. I might take a look at that. And Danny Secari mentions Liberté. Are we talking about the Liberté from Colombia? Am I remembering that correctly? There's a couple of these, and we'll talk about these. And they had a little more diverse product line than I thought before as well, considering the games of theirs that I was at least passingly familiar with. And I can't really claim to be more than passingly familiar with any of this stuff at this point. The only one I've had the opportunity to take a look at is Le Grand Guerre. And again, we'll do that one last, because it's the one I might have the most to say about it. Mr. John Madison, thanks for stopping by. All right, so Salve here, or Salve or Salve, is not expensive, which is unusual for Azure Wish, I gotta tell you. Next, I'm going to pronounce this Xhenor, and it is a fantasy game, so I believe I don't care too much. This is Calgon, the despicable wizard prince of Xhenor, feeling the end of his abomination-ridden reign nearing, decided to settle his succession. So you're playing one of his children on this map, which does give me a bit of a Titan vibe, I gotta tell you. And the winner is the new emperor king or whatever. There's a lot of counters here. There's 4 counter sheets, although they look to be oversized counters. Valley Games on Liberté. Very good, very good. Thank you. I have no idea who the designer is. I should take a closer look at that too, because it is a really interesting topic. Yeah, obviously Le Grand Guerre. Edward, thank you for stopping by. The Le Grand Guerre is the last game we'll get to, but it probably won't be quite 10 p.m. by the time we get there, because there's not that much stuff here. So Xhenor looks kind of interesting. You're up in the complete ass in the air on pronunciation on this. Noble Knight has it for $38. This is another one that does not go unpunched, near mint for $40, or $38 for very good to near mint. So if you don't know, when there were 2 conditions listed, the first of those is the box, and the second of those is the interior components. Now, I complained at one point about Noble Knight not being specific about when a game was punched or unpunched, but they've gotten way better about that. So I would assume, barring other information, and if you really want to know, you can call them and ask, that if it says unpunched, it's unpunched, and if it doesn't say unpunched, that it's not. That would be my best assumption at this time. And my personal orders, which are substantial, have borne that evidence out. So, all right. So, Mandarin Mike says Martin Wallace designed and published Liberté from Warfrog Games. Then he sold it or licensed it through Valley Games. So there we go on Liberté. That might be worth a look, even though I'm not the world's biggest fan of Martin Wallace as a designer, based on some things that I've heard. So about his design philosophy, not about anything else. So that is just a personal taste choice, not a rant of any kind. Anyway, a game of political and military intrigues. And there's a political element to this, and a resource element to this, and an economic element to this. So it actually looks somewhat interesting. And for $40, why not? Other than that, though, it is a fantasy game, so my personal interest in it is maybe not as high as it might otherwise be. So. Yeah, there's at least a couple people watching on Facebook. 3 people watching. Where's this look? Nobody's watching on Facebook right now, but 3 people thumbed it up. So thank you, those of you who gave me the thumbs up on Facebook. All right, so next up is Shoot, with exactly the title font for the game's title that you would expect here. But hilariously, this is a game about football. In other words, soccer, as we would call it here in America. A French hex and counter game of soccer simulation. Includes several teams, and every player has his own stats on the counters. This is not one I'm going to run down, personally. However, as I said with SPI's scrimmage, I I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to say we are going to design a conflict simulation based on this as a topic. And I that's pretty funny. I don't watch a lot of soccer. I do sort of semi pay attention sometimes to English Premier League, and I will watch the World Cup if there's a team that I care about in the World Cup, which hasn't been the case. Wasn't the case the last time. Hit and miss on this as far as I'm concerned, but it could be great. Who knows? I would expect that a game like this might have a fairly limited audience. Let me put it that way. Are there die rolls for offsides calls? Are there like your random event where your player pretends they got grievously injured on the field? Is that a thing? Let's check price history here. And as you can see, we have 2 copies of this that have sold ever on BGG, which is maybe not a big surprise. Like I said, these games are pretty rare. The top one was $35 and the bottom one was £20. So not on another one that's not particularly expensive. Now, just for the sake of reference, I actually, to be brutally honest, do not remember what Noble Knight charged me for it, but it was not vastly dissimilar from this number. We have a Geek Market copy for $250 US right now, and it says new, but you got to look and maybe talk to the person. We are topping out at about $250 here on BGG, but we're looking at a new copy and a like new copy for €250. You'll see a lot of blue on this because it's a euro. Those are prices in euros. The orange are US dollars, and there might be a couple of British pounds on here too. I don't see. Oh no, there's one right here for £65 in like new condition. But these are pretty rare, and I'm not. This is not a complaint about the price. I think the price that Noble Knight has for it is not unreasonable considering how hard to get it is. So they've got this first edition, which is in a monochrome box, which actually looks somewhat intriguing. I hope this isn't the one that shows up. That should be this one, which is the later edition, and this is going for $355. Like I said, that's somewhere in the neighborhood of what I paid. So just to set that as a baseline for what these things will tend to cost if they are games that people want, right? All right, now, these are some pretty interesting pieces here as well, and there's 2 of them that I will do in a row. There's Labatide de Friedland and Labatide de Ekmol, and I am wrong. There are 3 of them. Where's the 3rd one? Did they... It's this, which I didn't have a thing for. So this is the Vive l'Empereur series. So these are not Labatide games in the sense of Labatide that originated with GDW. It is now being handled by Clash of Arms and Marshall Enterprises, and which has a bunch of different rule sets. This is different, and it's a regimental level Napoleonic, at least if this follows the ones that... who's publishing these now? Legion Wargames has done a couple of these, 2 or 3 of them. Oh yeah, so there is news on Decision 2, I guess. We might talk about this next week. Their winter shipments are being prepared at this time. So if you've ordered something that Doc says will be out this year, you're going to probably be getting it pretty soon, and you probably have already received their confirmation email. So Didier Rouy is a very interesting designer who has done some very interesting things, including Flight of the Eagle. That is the English name because the French name is in French. Which is basically a set of Napoleonic Kriegspiel rules is basically what that is. And it's pretty interesting. There's like 3 volumes. They're all pretty much standalones. But they have different stuff in them. I got the first one. It looks pretty interesting. But these are part of this Vive l'Empereur series, which we will look at here, which has 11 games in it. And you'll see this Austerlitz game from Azure, which we'll talk about that in a second. Legion did Hanau, Leipzig, Wagram, and Quatre Batailles in Hispania, which is Peninsular War stuff, Le Retour de l'Empereur, which is 100 Days stuff, and Trois Batailles Allemands, which is 1813 or 1814 in Germany. There's some. This is a very intriguing looking series. That you're presumably talking, Jonathan Dyer, about this product, La Bataille de Wagram. So I may check the series out with this game. Then again, I do have the Eagles of France games too. So, but hey, it's Grand Tactical Napoleonic. I'm cool with supporting that effort. But this one's not out yet. But what Azure Wish did includes Friedland. Now, the only Friedland game I've got is the Library of Napoleonic Battles Friedland. There is a Friedland for La Bataille, but that's very expensive. It's another Art of Print Marshall Enterprises games. Those tend to all be quite pricey. Interestingly, I've physically seen a copy of this. Now, they did Friedland. They did this all by Didier Rouy. They did this Austerlitz game. I've got several games on Austerlitz at this point. And then they did Eckmühl. Now, Eckmühl is also the latest La Bataille game from Marshall Enterprises, and that's available right now. Stay tuned on that because we might be talking to them again pretty soon. And this is really for a pretty important battle, and there's not that many games on it. So, but I don't know a lot about it either. So, maybe there's reasons for that. In any case, Danny Secari is talking about Wagram. You were probably thinking of WoW, which is already out. That's like an expansion if you've already got Waterloo or Ligny and Quatre Bras. Wagram was done by Marshall Enterprises. So and there we go. So yeah, it was WoW, and I've got their older version of that, so I didn't pick it up, but I probably will at some point. We'll see. Well, it's not out yet, but it is on. There's a BGG page for it. So anyway, like I said, I've got a lot of games on Austerlitz. None of the ratings here are like through the roof, but there's more ratings than you might necessarily think, but not that many. 23 ratings for Friedland, for example. Now, this one goes for decent change as well, as you can tell. This fellow in Ireland would like €1,000 for his. That might be optimistic. But hey, you do what if you think you can get it. So there's that. This fella in the US is selling it for $150 in VG. Again, look at him before you push the button. So all three of these look kind of interesting, but I would probably choose to begin exploring the series with a more modern release from Legion rather than these high-priced collectibles from the 90s. So there's Friedland. Again, there's Austerlitz. This probably doesn't go incredibly cheap either. It doesn't, but it's not as much. 160, 159. These all seem to be floating north of 120. And hilariously, all of these sales are in US dollars, except for this one from like 2007, which is €40. The Leipzig game. Oh, we're talking about the Leipzig from Marshall Enterprises. Yeah, it is interesting. But it's also at that scale, it's kind of crazily large. So, be prepared for that. And it's also super duper expensive. Not impossible that we might do a campaign on that at some point, but we'll see. Because it's a game, it's a fascinating battle. But the battle is so spread out and happens over a longer period of time than we would necessarily expect. So it's difficult to do at the battalion scale like La Bataille is, right? So next up here is, and I'm clipping less because I got to run the mouse on this show. And then we have Eckmühl. And Dave Pryor says that, and I believe he's correct about this, although last I looked at the page, they still had some copies of the last one. But not many. They had like less than 10 copies last I checked. So they could easily be gone now, and Eckmühl is going to be the only So if you're interested in this series at all and you want to buy the Marshall Enterprises stuff, buy them immediately. So, because they usually do a few extra copies. It's not quite as bad as Thin Red Line, where they have extra copies too, but they're gone like within like 10 minutes. Oh, very good. So the Leipzig game from Didier Rouy, which is, again, a different scale, that might be worth a look in that case. if that's true, because I think handling that battle at the regimental or possibly brigade scale, I think is probably a good idea considering how large and spread out that battle is. So, but the Marshall Enterprises Leipzig is friggin' enormous too. I don't know how many maps it is, but it's a lot. ECMO here goes for, nobody's selling it right now, little less, 120. So 75 more recently, something like that, in like new. Who knows what the condition really was. So are we saying Marshall Enterprises is out of stock of ECMO or the previous game? I'm pretty sure they still have ECMO. I think last I checked they did. I do need to get that, by the way, because again, it's a cool battle that doesn't get covered very often. All right, so here's probably the best known thing that Azure Wish did over the course of its lifetime. 1993's Europa Universalis. This is a sprawling military, economic, and political game. I would probably define it as a war game. I think the military element is strong enough to warrant that in this case. As you are going to see here, the map is an area map, as you would expect for the kind of game that this is. And then there's this fella who has put the Americas map, like the rest of the world map, and the European map all on a big sheet of what looks like tinfoil, but which is obviously not tinfoil, and it's some kind of sheet metal. So it's a space hog. So this is a pretty interesting game, and it's one that got adapted by the original designer Philippe Thibault into a computer game called Europa Universalis, and we are now currently on Europa Universalis 4, which is a very mature and robust game, and I believe they are working on a new version. I absolutely blow at the video game, but you can easily get lost in that. It's super detailed, and the interesting thing about the video games is that you can play any nation on the map. You want to play, whatever is going on in wherever in the world, you can play it. That's true to a lesser extent of the other games from Paradox. But Europa Universalis has the whole world on the map, where like Crusader Kings does not, for example. Oh, that's no good. Crusader Kings 2 is I have not played Crusader Kings 3. I have played Crusader Kings 2, and I sucked at that too. I should pick up Crusader Kings 3 at some point. When it goes on sale, everything from Paradox does go on sale reasonably often. The price you want to look for Crusader Kings 3 at is probably less than $20. The sale prices seem to bottom out at about $15-16. So yeah, and we are going to actually touch on this as well, Perfidious Albion. So this is adapted into a computer game, and sometime in the last couple of years, the computer game is re-engineered back into a board game. So that game is called Europa Universalis: The Price of Power, and looks like BGG does not call that a re-implementation, but don't draw any conclusions from that, because BGG is pretty flaky about what they call re-implementations and what they don't. Sometimes it'll be like a completely different game with a somewhat different somewhat related system on a totally different topic, and they'll call it a re-implementation. In other cases, they won't, like this. Europa Universalis: The Price of Power is a completely different game from the original Europa Universalis, but the topic is the same. It covers about 300 years of European history, and you can't play every nation on the board, but you can play a good chunk of them, more than just like necessarily the big powers, and there's a lot of scenarios in the new one. I have played the new one. I like it a lot. I've played it twice now. Neither game was played to completion. Playtime is high. The complexity is pretty high for the kind of game that it is. That's probably true of this as well. And I liked it a lot, for the record. I have a half-done 3D printed storage solution for it. So, and the new one is really nice looking. So there's that too. I would expect expansions for it, but I don't know. They said they're going to do expansions, but I don't know what the current status of that effort is. So, all right. So, but for when this came out, this is not that bad looking of a map, to be honest about it. The pieces don't impress me particularly. That's not the map. Do we have pictures of the counters? Here's some pictures of the counters. And this is the military is pretty abstract in this, as you would kind of expect. But there is a substantial military element, and you will get in wars and stuff because that kind of thing did happen historically. Truthfully, if I really wanted to have this experience, I would either play The Price of Power or I would play the video game, which might mean I wait to play the next video game. I probably put about 100 hours into EU4 and EU3 together, I think. And I like it, but like I said, I suck at it, and I haven't touched it in quite a long time. And I there's like usually a year or two gap between times I play it, so I've forgotten everything that I learned last time and never actually managed to get any good at it. This thing doesn't go for as much as you might suspect, and that might be because people think that the new game is like a new version of it, but it really isn't. So these are not absolutely crazy prices considering how uncommon this is. And this was, I think, probably their biggest hit of everything that Azure Wish did. After all, this is the one that got adapted into a very well-known computer game, but it's not the only one of their games that got adapted into a computer game. All right, so Doug, thanks for stopping by. I will respond to your email too. But I gotta hear back from a couple of people first. We might end up pivoting. We'll see what happens. Anyway, so Europa Universalis. Now there is a Europa Universalis. Close all this extra stuff. Extension number 1, and as far as I'm aware, this is the only one that they did. This has some additional rules, some additional types of counters, and some additional scenarios. The one that they have, or one of the copies that they have on Noble Knight right now does include this expansion. So I suspect that if you really want this, you probably want the extension too, but if you don't end up with it, I don't know. Like I said, I'd probably choose to play either of the 2 more recent versions at this point. But if you're a big fan of the original game, then you definitely want this, to be honest. Now, prices on this, Noble Knight has it for $275. Is that correct? That number doesn't make any sense to me because I just looked at this before. I might not be looking at it here. I think they have a version with the extension as well. So the extension's pretty hard to get, is where that's going. All right. So we're back to Austerlitz, which apparently I didn't have. Now, this is another pretty interesting one, despite what I would call a really not great cover. La Foi et le Glaive. I guess we're going to call it Glaive. That's how I would pronounce it in English. And this is a diplomatic a game kind of covering politics and religion and some other stuff. And apparently it was designed to be played by correspondence. So designed to be played by mail, which is fairly interesting. This is a later version of that box. So I don't know what this is. This is a first edition. Are there 2 different versions of this? Not that this says. But it looks a lot like Europa Universalis in a lot of ways. But it's designed to be played via correspondence. It's probably somewhat similar. And it's kind of an intriguing game based on what I'm hearing here, based on the religious topic. And this is another one that's doesn't seem to be crazy expensive. Here's a copy in Spain, there's a copy in Italy, but they're all rare, right? I don't think that's Jesus. I think this is supposed to be some random monks or something like that. Nevertheless, not a great cover in my opinion. I also don't really care for their boxes, like the physical boxes themselves, because they're weird. But that's me being OCD as much as it is anything else. So this looks interesting. A game about religious conflict in the period 7th century AD. I was going to say this is quite a lot earlier than Europa Universalis. So that sounds pretty intriguing, actually. There's still substantial pagan holdouts in the 7th century. It's the 600s, right? So this looks pretty interesting, and this is one that I wouldn't mind investigating at some point. But we're now transitioning, starting with this one, into those Azure Wish games that I'd kind of like to check out personally, other than the Revolution Francaise. which is, like I said, coming and hopefully will be here. The post office picked it up, and Noble Knight handed it to the post office. Let me put it this way. And the post office hasn't done anything with it for a couple of days. Let me put it that way. But it's coming. Now, the next game is 1994's Hispania. And this is an Ancients game set on the Iberian Peninsula with a reasonably attractive looking map. And you can see somebody's playing this on the wall too, because they've got these magnetic counter clips. Yeah, it kind of does look a little like Barry Gibb. I got to tell you. You'll smoke a turd in hell for that one, but okay. But here's the counters, and you can see this is actually the inside of the box. It's got like this hollow edge thing going on. It doesn't cover this, but if you're interested in this topic in general, I would recommend looking into The Mission from White Dog. It's a Ben Madison game. He also did a game called The First Jihad, which I also have, but which I have not played. I have played The Mission, and it's pretty good. It's a States of Siege game with some substantial twists. So Hispania here sounds pretty interesting, though. This is 4th century BC, so you've got a whole bunch of Ancients action happening here between the Romans and the native Celtiberians, and then the Carthaginians have come into the picture at some point as well. There may even be some Greek colonies at that point. This says that it is basically a similar game to Britannia, relocating it to the ancient Iberian Peninsula. I've never played Britannia. I should picture that. I should remedy that, I should say. This is another one that does not seem to go for a particularly high price, and it's got 162 ratings, which for an Azure Wish game is high. But intriguing sounding game. But again, it's probably easier to get a copy of Britannia than this, I would think. But these prices are not at all crazy. Let's see what Noble Knight has it for. Up to $60 for an unpunched copy. That's very reasonable. Very good plus to excellent. That's very reasonable. All right. I'm not at all sure how to pronounce Grand Siecle. Siecle? I don't know. Alexander, if you're still here, let me know how bad that was. It's pretty bad. So this is the 18th century, and you are taking the part of these major powers of the 18th century. Louis XIV, William of Orange, Jan Sobieski of Poland, Charles the 12th, the Alexander of the North, King of Sweden, Peter the Great, Maria Theresa. If we're in that century, we should have Frederick the Great as well, but we'll see. So there's 9 scenarios here, 6 counter sheets at 960 counters, so they're oversized counters. It's one map, which is close to a standard size. Meandering Mike says Hispania, and I would take Mike's word for this, by the way. Mike has an obscene number of games. Says Hispania is pretty easy to find. So, and Patrick Pictures says it's a weird game, basically betting on waves of migrations, which makes sense, right? Given what it's about. So this looks intriguing too. It also looks somewhat like Europa Universalis 2 in a very broad sense. The map, I think, looks fairly nice. It's kind of that high saturation thing that Azure Wish did. But it's not a bad looking game. I'm not crazy about the counters, but there you go. I'm picky. Here's one I'm definitely interested in checking out. Unfortunately, it is one of the more expensive ones, as I recall. Scandinavia. This is 1997 BC, the Old World, and this is prehistoric Scandinavia on a hex map, which looks fairly nice. I don't know a lot about this game, although I will observe that this art style kind of reminds me of the art style in the Fate of All from Thin Red Line. Yeah, I didn't have confidence in it, so I'm not particularly surprised. Yeah, that's a French word I'm totally unfamiliar with. I don't know what it means, and this description does not tell me. And there's a fantasy element to this too, so you could play like elf princes. So it's just like your average Brant game. You could play the elf princes or Princess Sandra. Anyway, I'm not sure what's up with that, but the game itself sounds kind of intriguing. Now let's see what folks want for it. Well, this is what I was afraid of. Nobody wants anything for it because nobody's selling there. Siecle is Century. Okay, there you go. Thank you. So this isn't as crazy as I thought it was going to be honest about it. The top value here is 225 USD, and looks like 200 is kind of in the range. Those prices are a little bit old. The most recent copy was sold in May for 160 euros. Doesn't look like Noble Knight has it at the moment. At least if they do, it is not linked on BGG, which is not particularly surprising. And I will observe that maybe nobody will be surprised to learn that Callendale has done some video on this. So I should watch that, actually. And he's got some really nice shots of the map. And I think these maps are pretty attractive, actually. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't know about how high fantasy we're talking about, but there's definitely a fantasy element here. But like I said, I'm intrigued. Castles. Yeah, there's a lot of fantasy elements in here. Castles and dracars are things that I believe were not available in 2000 or so BC. But, like I said, fantasy element. But I'm curious about this. And Mike said he was looking for a copy as well. All right. Now, if I do another campaign on an Azure Wish game, it's likely to be this one, Russia 1917. This is about the Russian Civil War. And this calls it strategic level, but I've also heard it described as a fairly operational game, so take that for what it's worth. A lot of strategic level games end up with a substantial operational element anyway. See also World in Flames. Map is not the greatest looking map I've ever seen, but as you can see, it's two maps. It's a big game. It's Russia. Russia is big. This is a pretty intriguing looking game, and it's one of the higher rated ones on BGG2 with more ratings than you'd necessarily expect. But again, these are all came out in the 90s. Every one of these came out in the 90s. So here is apparently there's a vassal module for this, so that's cool too. So I'm a sucker for Russian Civil War stuff. I've got almost every game on the Russian Civil War ever released, but not this one. This is one of the super duper interesting games on this topic. There you go. Oh, John Madison has apparently played this. That's what did you think? I would be curious to know what you thought of this. So fascinating topic, and probably the most small, granular game on this topic that we're ever going to see. We are much more likely to see games more in line with your Soviet Dawns or your what's the Ted Racer game? Reds, which is a good game, or Triumph of Chaos. Those are more typical games on this topic. And the only reason I'm able to acquire every single game on this topic is because there's not that many of them. There's like 10, somewhere between 10 and 15. And you could, if you wanted, count the two different versions of Russian Civil War, one by SPI and one by decision, as the same game if you wanted to. They're very close, but they did make some changes in the magazine version that Joe Miranda, as I recall, did for S&T as it was. Basically everything from Azure Wish I've ever seen has English rules available somewhere, by the way. Usually that you can find them either on BGG or on Consim World. There may not be all of them, but all of the kind of major titles that people remember nowadays, there are English rules available. DJ Flippy has Xhenor, and you're not in league with EU or LRF, unfortunately. Okay, so fascinating looking game, and I will acquire this eventually, sooner or later. Now let's look at what the price landscape looks like. Noble Knight has it for 170, and various folks there's 4 for sale. eBay has a couple. There's 4 for sale here, one of which is in the US for 130. If this is new, never open, still in the shrink wrap for 130, sounds good to me. I'm not sure where this fella is, but there you go. Noble Knight wants 170 for a VG Plus to near mint unpunched copy, which is, I think, also, like I said, very reasonable. Now, this was designed, let's go back. This was designed by Francois Stanislaw Thomas. He is a designer I have mentioned before and whose work I am a bit familiar with because he designed Nations in Arms from Compass, as well as 3 other Napoleonic strategic, more or less, games covering most or all of the period of the Napoleonic Wars, including Le Grand Empire, which I've never seen an English version of that, and Pitt's War, which appeared in Paper Wars, and what's the other one? Napoleon Against Europe, which I have, and which Stuka Joe is familiar with. It's his fault that I bought the thing in the first place. Actually, it's hot in here. I'm going to take that off, and I've been wearing a hat long enough that my hair is under control. So my hair, unfortunately, tends to grow out. So it looks like I have a giant wiry. It's not really an afro, but I don't like it. So. Russia 1917, and then we'll move on to the last game in tonight's presentation, Le Grand Guerre 14 to 18. This is a game about World War I, if you didn't know, designed by Bruno Di Scaral and Philippe Thibault, and this is released in 1999. And I probably am inclined to give Callendale credit for raising the profile on this game significantly. I haven't played it. It looks impressive, so I'll play it at some point. So Le Grand Guerre. This is a large and ambitious and quite heavy game. This might be their heaviest game. It's the only one I've actually looked at the rules for, though, so it's hard to say that for sure, but there's a lot of rules in this, and I would be a little surprised if any of their other games were this heavy. It's also a 2-map game. It has a significant naval component, which is relatively uncommon for World War I games, but not unheard of, and it's one of the things that attracted me to this game, in addition to the fact that Callendale speaks glowingly of it. Which by itself is not enough to get me to want to buy it. But then when I watch his video on it and you hear his experience with it, I am reasonably confident in saying I will probably like this game quite a bit. Now, I did acquire a copy of this sometime, I think last year, might have been 2024, but it might also have been 2023, via a trade, which worked out great for me. It was like 1 or 2 war games and then a large pile of Traveler stuff that I had duplicates of. So, and it is officially 9:02 p.m. We'll get to the Noble Knight message in just a moment. We will cover this first. So, it's funny you should mention this because there is one. It is called, I think, the First World War. It is available from the Matrix / Slytherin conglomerate, whatever they are. It is basically a digital adaptation of this. I don't know how good it is. I can tell you that it looks fairly primitive, as those games tend to that came out at that particular time. More modern games tend to look nicer. But also, I understand, so the rules are in translation, of course, and I understand that the translation is maybe not the best. But I am basically committed to this game, to learning how to play this, or at least claiming to learn how to play this at some point. So... well, we're not pushing it back much, just by like 2 or 3 minutes here. So, and Matrix Games, as Danny mentions, Matrix Games is currently having a sale, so now is the time. Also, if you don't have it and you're a WIF person, you might think about buying the WIF expanded maps. That's like a complete map set of the entire planet at the WIF European scale. Very impractical to actually play the game with, but it would make a fine mural in your game room. Thank you for sending me that. You know who you are. I don't know that I'll ever play it on those maps because the European map scale will basically break the Pacific Theater, and I don't feel like dealing with that. So, now my copy, I want to say my copy only has the English rules. I might be misremembering that. I'm sure it would. Well, I mean, it would help if if you speak French anyway, and then you don't have to worry about the translation. You can just use the French rules, right? The names are all French on the maps, which is, I think, actually kind of neat. It is a World War One game designed from the French perspective. That right there, or at least from the perspective of French designers, that right there is intriguing, right? So as you can see, the map is, 90s, very 90s. And there's all these off-map boxes to represent basically the rest of the planet. Remember, World War One, it was not just confined to Europe. It was just bloodier in Europe than it was everywhere else. So, but you got the whole world here. Now, I've got a number of World War One games that kind of occupy this space of World War One strategic-ish level, that do attempt to simulate the naval aspects of World War One. The ones that I have played are Fatal Alliances, which is basically World in Flames for World War One, and a game that is not here. Balance of Powers is the other one that I've played. That's from Compass. Both of them are from Compass. There's multiple versions of Fatal Alliances available. I would buy the one from Compass. There is an errata counter sheet for it. The Compass should still have that, and it should come in the box if you buy it now. But I believe it is out of stock at Compass now. So, well, the people that named it probably was the world to them. They probably weren't terribly concerned about Germany, East Africa, or what was going on in the Pacific in World War One. So this is never a bad idea, but I will tell you that even like 120% helps a ton. It doesn't have to necessarily be doubled in size. So it's definitely on my to-do list. Maybe we'll get to it in 2025, and maybe we won't. To get this on a table and played. But first I need to establish a cadence of having people over. I almost had people over to play a couple of weeks ago, and it ended up not happening because something came up. So we're going to pivot and try and do that after Thanksgiving and have some people over here and see how it goes, and then we can hopefully make that a regular thing and get games like this played. So, all right, so that wraps, actually, our presentation on Azure Wish or Azure Wish edition, whatever it is. So let's hear really quick from our good friends at Noble Knight Games, the official sponsors of the Counterclipping Show. So take it away, Noble Knight.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more, going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at, complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world, just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, thanks very much to our good friends at Noble Knight Games. We will, I am sure, do another field trip up to Noble Knight at some point. But that's definitely not happening until 2024, at least, maybe 2025. Justigard mentions the Offensiva Outrance maps, deluxe, 120. Yeah, you can't get those anymore, though. You can blow them up yourself. Most copy shops will be able to do that. And we have generally often blown maps up for games that get played at Winterfest, and it really does help a lot. So Stephen Rochelle has wrapped clipping for the night. One counter sheet of an OCS mega pack. Eventually, you become so strong that you don't have to worry about that anymore. So, eventually, I find now this is partly because I'm used to it, but I find the regular clipper to be less tiring than the deluxe clipper, which is out of reach at the exact moment. It's busted anyway, so it doesn't matter. I've got the 2mm deluxe that still works fine, but that one got repaired on its own as well. So, but in any case, Brand has a copy of General Pershing's History of the Great War. That might be intriguing, although that's somebody with an opinion on the topic, I'm sure. Of course, Compass has done like a lot of games on World War I over the years because it's one of Bill's favorite topics. I've also got The Lamps Are Going Out. I've got Empires and Alliances. which I got from Noble Knight actually during the field trip. And what was the other? There's another one that I've got. Death in the Trenches. I've got that too. That takes, I think, based. I haven't played it, but based on talking to people who have, it sounds like it takes a lot longer to play than I would want a game like that to take, and that's a bit unattractive to me. I don't mind a long game. That's not the problem. The problem is I want to feel like the long game is worth the long game. And I'm not 100% sure that that would be. It does look intriguing in another couple of respects. Drop the name of the company at the end. Which company? Azure Wish, or are we talking about Noble Knight, or who here? My Peter Falk? There's just one more thing. That's about all I got for Peter Falk. This is absolutely true, though. The springs, you do kind of break the springs in after a while, but the springs will also break. So you will. There's like one part on this device that breaks, and it's the spring. And I have broken a spring, and it was my. I'm trying to remember if it was the 2mm or 2.5mm. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I got it. It took me a second. Yeah, even though you said it and explained it and ruined it in the comment. So, yeah, I didn't get it. So, I haven't seen that in quite a while, actually. I've seen clips of it. You see clips of it all over the place, but I haven't sat down and watched the entire movie in a long time. It is a good movie. So there's that. All right, so we are just going to talk about whatever we want to talk about. So if anybody's got any questions, now's a good time to ask. We've decided that we're going to pack up Screaming Eagles and revisit it in January, because it's just not working out for me to get down there based on the fact that there's been holidays and some other stuff has come up, and then I got sick, and my mom broke her arm over the weekend, and she's an older lady, and we're all very concerned. She's going to be fine, we think, but man, she's not happy because she's in a lot of pain right now. And they gave her Vicodin, but she doesn't want to take the Vicodin because she doesn't want to become a Vicodin junkie, which is completely understandable. So she's dealing with a broken arm, and it's a medial fracture in the right, up near the right shoulder, and we don't know how bad it is yet, because all she did was go to the emergency room. They took X-rays, and it's broken, and she's got to go see a specialist now, which is pretty typical. So the thing with the deluxe clippers is sometimes they hold up forever, right? They just hold up forever, and sometimes they don't. I've broken 2 of them, so I've got 2, and they've both broken at this point. So, interesting. Stephen Rochelle wore out the blade on the first standard clipper, developed a lot of slop in the upper arm, and the business end wouldn't properly align anymore. I don't feel I have used the shit out of this 2mm clipper. I think I have probably clipped 100,000 counters with this thing, and I don't feel like there's any slop in the blade at all. I don't see any reason why you couldn't remove the blade and sharpen the cutting edge with a file, but that might be more difficult than I'm making it sound. Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. Maybe, yeah. We could talk about this. I've got 3 quads. Am I right about that? 4 if you count, now 5. If you count Art of Siege, which you should. I've got 30 Years' War, Crimea, Napoleon's Last Battles, and Battles for the Ardennes, in addition to the Art of Siege. And I've played Napoleon's Last Battles. Have I played any of the other ones? I don't think so. No, I have not. But yeah, I don't think this is a bad idea. I would be curious how such a thing would be received. But you might also make sure that gets on the schedule so people can tell that it's actually happening, as opposed to the typical thing that wargaming conventions do, which is just kind of set it up on the back end. This is true, and in fact, my copy of Crimean War came from Drew. So you were standing nearby when that trade occurred. So there's that. All right. So Justigard says he wore out the blade on the first deluxe clipper started to tear corners. I mean, that would be a problem if that's happening. MMP white core stock is particularly degrading. I haven't noticed that. So here's the deal, though. These are manufactured offshore. Okay, Oregon Laminations is not the manufacturer of either the standard or deluxe clipper. So frankly, quality control is not. It's fine, but there is a certain amount of drift in different specific devices. Okay. So that's why, for example, that sometimes the plastic deluxe clipper just breaks and sometimes the blades on this wear out. I have not had that happen. It could, I suppose, happen on my 3mm, which is back in, I did finally reassemble it. I hardly ever use the 3mm though. The only thing, I will not use this on counters of less than 1 inch. So, and this is the 3, it's friggin' stiff. I would get super tired clipping with that. The 2.5 is a little squeaky, but it's that spring is thoroughly broken in as well. This is the one that I broke, and I actually, because I needed it immediately, of course, I actually replaced. I took the 3mm apart, put that spring in here, so that's the spring that's nice and soft now. And then I called Oregon Laminations and bought a replacement spring from them, and that's the spring that's in the 3 right now, and it is very stiff. So I believe you could source the springs from McMaster Carr or Granger or any big hardware place. So Danny has been using his since 2016 with no issues. Deluxe 2.5. That's fantastic. Now you'll notice. Hold on. I put the dice in here. It didn't help. I mean, maybe it helped, but they broke anyway. So, 35,000 counters. My first deluxe broke after about 6 months. And I replaced it. I called them and had a conversation with them, and I replaced it, and they didn't comp me one, but I replaced it with the regular, with this exact clipper, in fact, and it is held up beautifully since then. So, this is true. You could do this. However, if you were going to do this, then I would use ABS rather than the filament I typically use. ABS is basically Lego plastic. Lego plastic is ABS. So I would run it a little high, and ABS is hard to print with because it has a higher tendency to warp, like substantially. So you'd have to be concerned about that. How do I know? I mean, we're all guessing here, right? So it's all fine. All right, Eric Goebel is working on reading GRD's March to Victory. No, they did not publish an East Front version. They did 2 games in the, is it called the Glory series? I forget which is which, because they were separate series for World War I and the Pacific. And they did 2 games for World War I, which were March to Victory and Over There, which is basically the West Front. But Over There, I think it's Over There, also includes maps for Mexico and East Africa, as I recall. They never did an East Front one. And they did 2 in the Pacific. Those were The Damned Die Hard, which is the Philippines in, I think, late 1941, early 1942. And War of Resistance, which is a big chunk of the Second Sino-Japanese War, which is the land war in China. And I actually picked that. I have both of those. I don't have either of the World War I ones, and I don't feel like I need them. But I do have both of the Pacific ones at this point. I got a pretty good price on War of Resistance, and as I recall, a very good price on, which was a local trade. Well, it was a buy off a local, and I got The Damned Die Hard for a pretty good price off of eBay, as I recall. So, HMS GRD. So I don't like to do that, John, because remember that HMS GRD is different people than, or at least it's owned by different people than GRD was, right? GRD was pretty much Winston Hamilton, and when he passed away, that was kind of the end of, formally no, but it was really the end of GRD as a viable entity. And then it went to eventually landed with the HMS people, and those are the bedwetters that have not actually released this product. So, Home Before the Leaves Fall was from Clash of Arms. All right, that was a Chrome tab crash. Everything's crashing on here. It's actually been pretty well behaved for the last day or two, but it's still crashing a lot. So, ugh. I don't use. I now, part of this is probably thus like a dexterity check, right? The physical skill using the rotary cutter and getting used to the rotary cutter and all that stuff. But I find rotary cutters kind of scary because I feel like I'm going to cut myself, which I have never done. But I haven't used a rotary cutter that much because every time I have used a rotary cutter, I have ruined counters, and I don't like to ruin counters. So if that methodology is working for anybody else, then awesome. But normally, I don't feel like it's necessary. Now, on the other hand, if the game has center nibs or something like that, that's a little bit different. Unfortunately, Noble Knight does not carry new computers, so this might be part of my problem. It might be an eyesight thing. That's possible. Now, if I need, let's say, counters have center nibs or something, I will typically cut them out with a X-Acto knife or similar device, and I will not typically use a ruler for that. But if you are using the rotary cutter using a steel ruler, that might work better. That could easily work better. But I don't know. I don't generally feel like it's necessary. Now, bear in mind, I'm going to clip the corners on the counters anyway, unless they're round counters or something like that. So I don't care if they're dog-eared particularly, because I'm going to clip the corners. So just bear that in mind. So we've got still a decent number of people here, so I'm gonna keep the show going as long as people want to continue to watch. I think I am on some medication that's kind of affecting me in a not entirely pleasant way. My energy level is pretty low, and I actually got kind of nauseous today, and that could have been the medication as well. I don't know. Are we talking nail files or emery boards? I'm curious about this technique. All right, Mark Hodgkinson says there's a very active group of Fatal Alliances in Norway and Finland. He has Dreadnoughts and Flames. There's actually kind of a confusing vassal landscape for World in Flames because there's multiple modules. There's like the official module, which is nice, which was like done by a professional person, which is included if you buy the collector's edition. And then there's like an unofficial version that includes a bunch of additional options from older versions of the game. It also includes an option whereby you can play on the European scale maps if you want. So Jonathan Dyer says emery boards. I mean, that is basically sandpaper, right? Right? Okay, column nail files. Because I've got, like, the only nail file I've got is the one that comes on the toenail clipper or fingernail clipper. I used these tiny fingernail clippers for decades to clip corners with. And even when I was not actively playing war games, I would every once in a while, I would bust out like Ancient World or something like that and fiddle with it and end up clipping the counter. So my Ancient World, one reason why I'm buying the deluxe version, is my copy of those games is clipped with a nail clipper. And that's not as nice. I don't really have any news to report on this. I kind of hit a snag. I bit off more than I could chew. Let me put it this way. In having this idea where I was going to do Europe and the Pacific, because I don't have a good map model for the Pacific, and I would need some help from somebody that knows ArcGIS or a comparable product or something like that to kind of find a map projection that makes sense for the Pacific. I can do that. I can kludge Europe together, right? Which is exactly what I did. I can't do that with the Pacific. So because the Pacific is really big, and map the map will be distorted too much if you're not super careful. So there we go. So Brant's talking about the Armchair Dragoons digital convention. Couple of things. It's digital, so you can participate, and it's not the same weekend as Winter Offensive this time. So there's that. So check this out. It's over on the Armchair Dragoons website at armchairdragoons.com, and we will, of course, be talking about this in more detail. And there may be some exclusive or at least timed exclusive content from the channel on for the digital convention as well. Area movement for naval, I think, makes tons of sense. I didn't want area movement for land. I mean, I did want the same system to work for Europe and the Pacific, which kind of commits me, because I'm designing it to a hex map, right? But you could make a naval area system. I mean, WIFLA works like that basically, and that would totally work. So this is true, but I kind of want to have it imagined at least so that I can make sure it all works together at the end. That's been a challenge for other projects that have attempted that. But I think that the right answer is to pick a topic that is less ambitious, right? All right, Brian Melville. So this actually, I have made a connection that will make this possible. Not only GBACW and Line of Battle, but Blind Swords as well. That was actually the sticking point. I wanted to include Blind Swords in that conversation as well. So I've made the contact to make that happen, and I just have to actually make that happen. So before I even get to a developer, I need a map person to help me with ArcGIS. So this actually sounds pretty similar to the naval system in the later Europa games, which had individual hexes, but there were also like large hexes too, to govern some of the naval movement. RDCon is a possibility for 2025, but we'll see. My problem with that is I'm already committed to too many conventions that I don't run. So I'd have to ditch probably 2 conventions to make that happen, and I don't feel like I can do that for 2025. But for 2026, it's possible. I would like to do it, but it's also a big project. So this is true. Good. The developer can be the map person as well. So if you know anybody, let me know. You've got my email address. Like I said, if you look at, also, I'm pretty sure the Second World War from Diffraction has the naval, what we will call for the purposes of tonight, naval megahexes, uses something similar as well. So it's not an unknown idea. And in fact, that game, that War in Europe game that I was working on, I will get back to that at some point. It's just a matter of when, because that's a game design idea that I keep coming back to. So I will get back to it eventually. But half my projects peter out anyway. So it's if I actually finish something, it's a cause for celebration. So, well, maybe, but that's not necessarily it's not an obscene drive particularly. It's about the same drive as it would be for Noble Knight, I would think. So it's a decent drive, but it's not crazy. It's not like a 15 or 20 hour drive or anything like that. So it's not impossible for me to make it down there, but I got to think about time too. So yes, exactly, John, and that's why I haven't bothered you with this. So because I know you're already working on something. So USN is one that so I actually have 2 different versions of USN at this point. I have USN Deluxe from Decision because of recommendations. I hear it's actually pretty good. I forget where I bought that. Was it Noble Knight? It might have been. And I've got the original in the flat from, well, the original is the magazine version, I guess, but I've got the flat version from SPI. So I would like to, that's another item on the to-do list, is to get to that, as well as a variety of things I've talked about in the past, like doing a compare and contrast between new GBACW and old GBACW, and like compare and contrast the TSR Le Grand Armée with the SPI Le Grand Armée. They are in fact pretty completely different games actually. They do not use the same system. So I did appreciate you doing all the driving on that trip, by the way, Brian. I was prepared to drive, so should that have been necessary. But I also didn't smoke in your car, so there's that. Yeah, that kind of thing where I'm going to spend a lot. So, I'm going to get back to the tobacco cessation thing here. I think the reason why it's working to the extent that it's worked so far here is because I picked the timing so that it made a lot of sense. I knew I wasn't going to be doing a huge amount of driving, and it was really a major contribution to why I started smoking again was my commute, my hour and 45-minute commute. Now it's once a week, soon to be twice a week, but it's once a week, and I can handle that. But man, it's really difficult to leave the house at 5:45 in the morning, not smoke and drive for 2 hours. I can drink all the coffee I want, but if you drink too much, you get flaky, right? So, and you don't have to drive through Indiana, so that's a extra added bonus there. So there's also the megahex idea has popped up in a couple other places too. There's this system called the 7-hex system, and I'm trying to remember who published that. Legion or Revolution or somebody like that. So I did, and part of the reason for posting it and talking about it here is to kind of announce it, so I will feel bad if I disappoint you all. When I disappoint you all. I've got about a dozen cigars in the house that I really would like to get rid of. Somebody may be getting them for Christmas. Oh, that's a good point too. You're driving in the opposite direction of Indiana, always wise. So the Blenheim game. Yes, this is in fact the game I am thinking of. And it's a Legion and a Steve Poole design. Thank you, Jonathan Dyer and Stuka Joe. And I don't think they've done another game. It was supposed to be a series, but I don't think they've done another game in that series. I would be interested in seeing that evolve. But it's an interesting idea. We've also seen the megahex idea in the GMT East Front series. If you look at the inset maps for Leningrad and Sevastopol. They work like that, where they are 7 hex big hexes with 7 little hexes inside. So this I am not familiar with. I do have the Fate of All. So John, I am probably, because Winterfest will be about half an hour from me or less, I will probably not stay at the hotel the entire time. I am likely to stay at the hotel through at least Monday night. But just to shave costs a little bit, I think I'm gonna spend Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday nights out there, and then just commute the rest of the week. So I will be able to go home and get it if I forget it. So ask me when I'm there. The chances of me remembering between then and now are very small. So. All right, so Brant says that he saw an in-development game where the naval stuff wasn't traditional megahexes, but merged multiple hexes together into larger areas that were treated as a single space. That is similar to the way WIF does it. There's 2 more of those on the CPO list. So this is the pre-order list through Legion. They do it a little bit weird, and they don't promote anything at all. If it floats, it floats. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So... yeah, I kind of agree with this, actually. I mean, there could be a lot of reasons why it hasn't seen another release, but it's not necessarily that it bombed. Blood Tree Rebellion, I haven't played this yet, so it is on the to-do list. So, 19 hex megahexes. That seems interesting. I've seen these, and there is some fairly interesting, and one of the most interesting things to me. So let me start out by saying that so for those who don't know, Adventure Conqueror King is what we call a D&D clone, and there's a bunch of different types of clones that are like designed to replicate some specific experience or designed to have a new twist on traditional Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, Adventure Conqueror King is one of those, and I picked it up in PDF when it first came out, and It is a clone of basic D&D, basic expert D&D, with some additional twists that are fairly interesting, but not enough in and of themselves to get me to be interested in the game. The interesting thing about Adventure Conquer King is actually the advice that they give for building campaign maps, and that's what Stephen Rochelle is touching on here. That part of that book is really useful for doing this, for like building hex maps of fantasy campaigns and placing stuff in it. It is wildly ahistorical with its population numbers, and I know that because I actually did the historical demographic research to build my own alternate system. And it's actually rather hard to find good, as you might imagine. It's not super easy to find good demographic information on medieval Europe, depending on what part of medieval Europe we're talking about. So there is some guesswork involved, but generally speaking, the population numbers given in Adventure Conquer King, and in Harn for that matter, but I think in Harn's case it's intentional, are way under what the historical population densities would be. So is that important? Not really, no. Because you are, after all, not trying to design medieval Europe, you're trying to design a fantasy setting. So you don't need to think about it as hard as I thought about it. Let me put it that way. This is a good point, too. They have not, but this is true as well. So back in the day, Metagaming did 2 games, Melee and Wizard, which are basically like fantasy battle games. Melee had fighters and Wizard had wizards. And those eventually were transformed into the fantasy trip. After a long time, Steve Jackson, who designed the thing in the first place, managed to get the rights back from Metagaming and republished it himself in a giant box that contains approximately 2 metric tons of cardboard. It's a lot. Yeah, and a couple of designers have pulled their games from Legion because it's just sitting around, you know. So, and Herman's Dunkirk game, that seems crazy that that's been floating around, but probably nobody knows about it, would be my guess. I should do a show on that, actually. All right, so Megahexes is like how, yeah, kind of, yeah. So, I mean, this is a little bit different from the examples that we've talked about so far, but in Titan, when you meet in a board space, which aren't hexagons, are they hexagons? They might be 6-sided. They might be 5-sided too, I'm not sure, I remember, but you fight the battle out with the pieces in the space on this hex map. That depends on the terrain that you're fighting in, and it's actually pretty cool. I'm really trying not to back Kickstarters unless it's something I'm super duper into. I did back I backed a book on fantasy world building recently. I backed the Cosmere RPG, but I didn't back the whole thing. I backed just the Stormlight Archive stuff. So I cut my price in half basically by making that decision, and I'm cool with that. I backed the Ars Magica Deluxe 5th edition, whatever they're calling that Kickstarter. That just closed not too long ago. I backed the Euro Wargames thing from Nuts Publishing. And I backed the new La Bataille game that's showing up in Against the Odds magazine. That's kind of a lot of Kickstarters from me. That's probably as many Kickstarters that I've backed in the last few months as I have in the entire previous history of Kickstarter. So bear that in mind, because you never know when you're going to take a bath on it, right? Is the game, you're never going to see it, right? Do we trust the people? No, in some of those cases, no, I got no problem trusting them. From Mongoose, yeah, fine. From Atlas Games, yeah, I've been dealing with them for years. I'm cool with that. From Against the Odds, sure, no problem. From Nuts, yeah, no problem from them either. The Stormlight, the Cosmere game, I'm not really familiar with them, but they appear to be maintaining a high profile and talking about the thing. So I was okay with that. I still have my original Avalon. It's not the original release, but I still have my Avalon Hill copy of Titan, and I am never getting rid of it. Because I want the newer version from Valley Games, I think, is nice, but it doesn't have the Dave Trampier art. And no, Culm is the battle from that's showing up that will come out from Against the Odds magazine. We put it that way. La Bataille de Culm. No, this is actually true. I have done pre-orders through Kickstarter because Compass's Kickstarters, with exceptions like Burning Banners maybe, but their Kickstarters are basically just a way to pre-order late, right? And I have generally not worried about it too much because I generally know I'm going to Compass Expo and I'll just buy it there. But if like timing is a factor or something like that, or I didn't go to Compass Expo this year, I have done a couple of pre-orders through Kickstarter. It's just easy that I can do it that way. So, and I'm pretty sure it's the same price. The Rocket Chickamauga would have been a good one to do. And Flying Pig is another one where I would have no hesitation in trusting the company. So is Lock and Load, for the record. And Lock and Load's things that have been getting waited for a long time, those things should be arriving at Lock and Load pretty soon, from what I'm hearing. So stay tuned on that. Are we talking about Engine Thieves? We might be talking about Engine Thieves. That's Wes Crawford's game. It actually looks pretty interesting. It's based on an actual historical train raid that occurred in the Civil War, and it actually looks pretty interesting. So yeah, they have been, now that they got, I am not privy to any details about what's going on with Lock and Load. Okay, I said at the time, it's like, I don't know what's going on. I could speculate, but that's all it would be, is speculation, and I don't want to be the source of bullshit. So I'm not sure what happened. I said at the time that I thought they would get it straightened out sooner or later. And that appears to be happening. So it's late. People are upset. I get that, but I've met David. I didn't think David was going to stiff people, at least not on purpose. So DJ Flippy says Titan is his #1 nostalgia game. It makes me warp back to his childhood like the food critic from Ratatouille. That's pretty cool. I think Titan is a pretty cool game. I think it takes longer than it should to play, but you know, if you play it a lot, you probably play it a lot faster too. So there's that. So yeah, and I like I said, anything I could say about this would be speculative, and I don't want to speculate. So certainly not on a live show with 110 people watching. I think that would be a dick move, in my opinion. As Mo says, Kickstarters do get delayed for various reasons. It's actually pretty unusual for a Kickstarter to deliver dead on time, to be honest. Almost all the time, there's some, unless they build in a bunch of buffer time, which some of them do, then it's almost inevitable that there will be some kind of delay at some point. Somebody will an artist will get sick, for example. That could throw your whole product calendar off, right? Yeah. Oh, I didn't know you were at Fort. I didn't know you were. You talking about Circle DC, Joe? I didn't know you were there. That's cool. But yeah, I like Titan. I haven't played it in 20 years, but I'm never getting rid of that copy. And as Joe said earlier, I'm not going to run the comment down. Every piece of art is actually different. So you've got 25 different troll counters. Every troll is unique. They are all uniquely drawn. Dave Trampier was a genius. So, Kala Cthulhu? You're talking about Call of Cthulhu. Well, this is not quite how they explain the situation now, but the company ownership did change a couple of times in this period, and fortunately, the people who are now doing business as Chaosium, and it's more or less the same company, more or less, with more or less totally different people, but they seem to have stabilized a very unstable company. Let me put it that way. And how they did that, I'm not sure. But they're doing very nice stuff. I'm very happy with it. I do not buy all of the Call of Cthulhu stuff. I have about 28, let's call it 30 inches of Call of Cthulhu stuff on the shelves. I feel like that's plenty. So, might be used in speech to test. Mo says that the difference between a Kickstarter and a published game is you pay up front, you get to see the delays that are behind the scenes in a published game. That's true. But remember that even where we have, say, a GMT P500 series system, where the the biggest difference between a Kickstarter and a pre-order, a traditional War Games pre-order anyway, which is all everybody's to some extent probably copied the GMT model on this. The big difference there is that it from GMT or Multiman or Compass or whoever, you're probably not paying when you place the order. Or Decision works like this too. You're putting it in a pre-order, and they will let you know when they're going to charge. And I'm completely comfortable with that. With Kickstarter, you pay at the end of the Kickstarter, or with GameFound, or with Backer Kit, or whoever they're going through, right? So that there is some additional risk there. I'm not worried about, I put a P500 order in from GMT and they're going to charge me at a random time and the game's not coming out, or that they're going to not charge me and not ship me the game. That is not a concern. And if it were to happen, I would call them up and say, what's going on? And they would fix it. So easy, right? I have found that, I don't know about anybody else's experience, and this is 100% anecdotal, but I have found that speech to text works a lot better than it used to, and spell check works a lot worse. And I don't know why. That's really annoying. This is possible. I thought you might have been talking about one of those various Cthulhu products, right? Like weird World War Cthulhu or something like, or the Cthulhu thing that DVG did, for example. And I don't have any interest in that stuff at all. Nothing wrong with it. That's not my bag. So. Remind me, Mike, what Fire and Sword was. There you go. There you go. Autocorrect sucks now. At least on Android. That's where I encounter it. That's what I'm complaining about. So this is pretty neat, actually. It might be more difficult if you've got an unusual last name. Let me put it that way. Oh, okay. Hungary 1945. Yeah, okay. I remember hearing about this. So I am fortunately not buying Panzer Grenadier stuff right now. I do have a couple of Panzer Grenadier things. I will probably try and do another video on Panzer Grenadier at some point. This feels pretty late too. I could be wrong. I thought this was supposed to be out like last year, and it's not out yet as far as I know. The truth of this is nobody knows this yet. Everybody, I mean, people are trying to prepare for this. If it happens, I don't take it as a given that it will happen. It's dumb. It's a dumb idea. And I don't know why anybody thinks it's a good idea. But if it happens, it happens, and we'll have to deal with it. It is going to fuck board games up pretty bad. RPGs less so, because there is an option to buy digital RPGs. So... And the reality of it is that companies will find a way around tariffs, or they will merely pass the cost on to the consumers, which is, of course, what they have to do. Their costs are going up, right? All right. Brant says he tends to back more RPG stuff on Kickstarter because he gets more Wargame stuff sent to the site. There's more RPG stuff on Kickstarter than Wargaming stuff too, and there just is. It's reasonably, I don't want to say rare, but relatively few wargame publishers are really operating on crowdfunding platforms now. Lock and Load is, Compass is, Flying Pig is, Worthington is. There's a couple other ones, but like GMT doesn't, MMP doesn't, Compass does, but it's just a late pre-order. So I normally buy war games either from Noble Knight if it's something old, or directly from the company if it's something I can just buy from the company. And I am happy to support the publishers, right? This is why I tend to put in pre-orders, because then I get my cost savings as well, right? I suspect that the right person to ask this question of might be David Heath, but also Kickstarter is a much larger platform than GameFound or BackerKit, right? So your project might get a lot more visibility on Kickstarter than you might get on a different crowdfunding platform. So this is true too. There's a lot of STLs. I bought one of the Traveler ships And that's actually when the printer stopped working, was when I was trying to print that stuff out. And so suddenly the printer was no longer printing anything that's like a big job. That's a fair question too, actually. That Brant is asking here. Or is John asking as a future publisher or as a game buyer? Oh, so that's good. That's good. I have backed on GameFound before. I think once. I think only once. I've backed, I don't know, 20 Kickstarters over the years, something like that. But like a lot, like half of them have been in like the last year or so. And Mongoose hasn't even done one that recently. There is a JTOS Volume 3 Kickstarter that was their most recent Traveler Kickstarter. And I did back that out, but whatever they want to do for Traveler, yeah, fine, whatever. And if they do a Kickstarter, it tends to be a huge savings off of the retail price. If you bought the Deep Night Revelation stuff at retail, as opposed to getting the Kickstarter, it would cost you, I don't know, but 3 or 4 times as much, something like that. So I would be curious, Brant. Maybe we should have you on the show to talk about this. Actually, that would be pretty interesting. But like I said, most of those are late. Now, not necessarily 2 years late, right? Like the lock and load stuff. I want to say that stuff is, if not 2 years, it's pretty close at this point. But Draco Ideas is a good idea too. And Worthington, I'm not sure. What did I back from Worthington? I didn't back it. I just bought it after the fact. The new domain right is from Worthington. So now, on the other hand, I will say that a decent chunk of the time, yeah, it's super late and people have given up on it. And after many years, the person delivered. I can think of examples when that happened. There was an RPG Kickstarter for a game called Far West by Gareth Skarka years and years ago, and he hit some snags and had some things in his personal life blow up, and it just came out last year. It was like 10 years late. And it almost fucking killed the guy. I mean, Garrett's a friend of mine. So I know what he went through not getting this game done. And it literally almost killed him. So, let's have some empathy. I'm not asking anybody to get willingly ripped off, but let's have some empathy for delays too, right? So, this is nice. I don't have to worry about this because they ship in the U.S. from the U.S. So if I order something from Mongoose, it comes from Kentucky or Tennessee or something like that. So this is generally the case. Yeah. Yeah. This is unusual though, right? If somebody's especially consistently delivering early, I suspect that what is happening here is, without talking to anybody, so I'm guessing, and yes, this is speculation, but at least it's not damaging speculation. Or potentially damaging speculation. So I suspect that what Worthington is doing here is building in an extra 3 months or whatever it is buffer time, just in case there's a delay. But Worthington has been in business for a good long time now, so they have their process down and there's really no delays have come up. So therefore, it's early, right? So now, is that a smart way to do it? Yeah, but also remember that on a bunch of projects have crowdfunded, and they didn't cover their costs in their crowdfunding. They miscalculated what the MSRP or whatever it was going to be, and have ended up either not delivering because they couldn't afford it. They didn't have the money because they didn't ask for enough money. What they did with the money is another story. But and I'm not talking about games necessarily here, but there's that. This is plausible too, is that they're ready to just get the cash and push the button. So that's completely reasonable. Don't forget, Kickstarter takes a cut, right? Or GameFound or whoever. They're going to take a cut too. So you've got to build that in. You've got to build in a way to do international shipping, or just say, we are not going to do international shipping. You can make that decision, but you'll get some flack for it, but who cares? But you won't get those customers either. So, or you'll get those customers, but they won't back your Kickstarter because they have another more economical way to purchase the product if they really do want it. So this has occurred as well. So This is called negative cash flow, and it has fucked up several companies. But the negative cash flow phenomenon has not, that's not new either, right? Imperium Games, that was their problem. They had no cash flow. That was SPI's problem, for that matter. So Mo says that the other good thing is that Worthington's games are generally simple games without a high component count, so it's much easier to have them pretty much done within launch. Maybe, but you know what? The Civil War Brigade Battle Series, there's a good number of counters in those games. Those aren't super tiny games. Something like what's another thing I've got from Worthington? Soviet Dawn has a deck of cards and then about 12 playing pieces, and a board. So yeah, something like that. That is probably less work to prepare to just push the button on the printer. But like the Civil War Brigade battle games there's a decent chunk of stuff in those, so they're not all like too super duper tiny. Divine Right's got a lot of stuff in it. Yeah, and it's an oversized box too. So there's cards and counters and a map and multiple booklets, and I think there's multiple booklets. There's definitely multiple booklets. So, I mean, there's a lot of... Watch the unboxing video that I did. I've done so many unboxing videos at this point that I can't keep track of my own unboxing videos. Devil Pigs. Remind me what they did? Because the name's ringing a bell, but I'm not putting that together. Yeah, Divine Right. I bought it. I just bought it directly from Worthington after the crowdfunding campaign had already closed. Heroes of Normandy. Okay, very good. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of costs, and maybe there's better resources for planning this kind of thing now. That's possible. But a lot of people doing Kickstarters have gotten caught pants down on shipping costs or a higher than expected proportion of the people that backed it were in Australia, and it's ridiculously expensive to ship down there. So Heroes of Normandy was not something I got into, so it's probably fine. But yeah, and I know Gippy's done content on that. But it's almost 10. Holy cow. So I guess we're not quite done. With all the clicking, I didn't get that much. I didn't clip that fast. I usually clip faster than this. 1 Hour World War II, that's coming as well. And that's got a pretty low component count. I mean, that's kind of the point of that game. Boots on the Ground, I've never really looked at. 1 Hour World War II looks like it's got some potential. That's Clint Warren Davies' game. He has done a number. We've had him on the show. He's done a number of interesting things, and 1 Hour World War II looks like it might land pretty strong. We'll see when it is actually out. I think it is either fulfilling now or it is very close to fulfillment, as I recall, unless I'm mixing it with something else, which happens a lot. So there we go. Mike says it's out. That means it's out. That probably means Mike's got it. There you go. Oh, so this has been out for at least a month or two then, right? So there you go. The next convention I go to is planned to be the Armchair Dragoons digital convention, if we're counting that, and Winterfest if we're not. Incidentally, I'm waiting for details on exactly what is going on, but it sounds like Marshall Enterprises will be at Winterfest, so that ought to be fairly interesting. All right, folks, we are going to wrap this up here. So we do have the show tomorrow with Dan, the Chit Show. Our special guest will be Mr. James Day. That's very exciting that we'll be able to get him. And I called him by his correct name and not the name of the guy I worked with 30 years ago. So anyone know the playtime? I assume we're kidding here. So yeah, this has been out for approximately a month then. There you go. So Mo, thanks for stopping by. I'll try to have another video this week. I did have a video on the books channel last week, which was basically, what did I do? It was basically the November reading wrap-up. I talked about the books I read in November. So hop on over there to Voyages into Imagination if you want. And yeah, so I'm waiting to hear back from Dennis to find out exactly what they're doing, but they're going to be there to my knowledge. So, so we'll see what their plans are, and we're probably going to have Dennis on for their interview too. Dennis and possibly other folks. We'll see how that works out. There's a whole bunch of shows and stuff that I want to do, and I just haven't had the time and the energy at the same time to get them all done. So, all right, folks, we are going to wrap tonight. So I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I'll remember to take the ticker down now. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. This has been a very solid show. I didn't have quite enough topic here. Maybe I should have had a second company that only did 15 products, and I could have got through them all. I buzzed through a lot of those games. I've got a lot to say about GMT games because I've played a lot of GMT games, and I've seen a lot of GMT games, and I've talked to people about a lot of GMT games, and SPI and Avalon Hill and things like that. There's a lot less opportunity to do that with Azure Wish. But I also think they're a really interesting publisher that deserved a little bit of attention. So even though they're out of business. So at least as far as I know. Thank you, John. John Clark, it's going okay so far. I have been tempted occasionally. So everybody have a great rest of the night, and we will see you all again next week. Let me check something. There will not be a show or shows the week of Christmas, just to get that out there. My family does all of the Christmas stuff on Christmas Eve. My wife's family does it all on Christmas Day, so it works out great. But that does mean that I will be basically completely tied up on both Tuesday and Wednesday. So we might as well just not have a Monday show either. So we will not be there will be no show on December 23rd, but there will be one on December 16th, which will be next week. So everybody have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you all again.